I think so. I respect everything Jeffrey said, but it is top-down. It's talking about how institutions and laws might govern people. But that's not how people live their lives, of course. They live from the bottom up, as it were, and occasionally look up. If they were to hear a phrase like a club of democracies, we know straight away the kind of rhetoric that would be deployed against them, that of elitism. You are the elite democracies who are telling us how to behave. Populism knows how to respond to institutions. It has no respect for the United Nations, for the World Health Organization, for what was left of Bretton Woods and the IMF, and the way or any kind of institution is structured around the world and Europe and elsewhere. Of course, we're looking towards America as the leader of the populists there, and we know that Trump has no respect for any other leaders than Meloni, Modi, Lukashenko, Putin, Xi, Milei in Argentina, and so on, the ones who he regards as strong. And what underlines all this, both his election and the election of many others around the world of his stamp, is the technology that allowed it to happen. And we can look back at history and see that this is not really the first time. It was a different sort of technology. If you were around in 1885, there was no telephone, there were no motor cars, there were no aeroplanes, there was no, there was telegrams, and that was about it. And then within 15 or 20 years, the world completely changed. And a little while after that, in about well, as far as America was concerned, they weren't in the First World War, but when Alexander Graham Bell first had a conversation between New York and San Francisco in 1915, everything was clearly going to change. And the First World War was a technological war and a disaster as a result of it, for which the world was not prepared. And we are not prepared now for the technology that is coming. It is a tsunami. And it's the human family is sitting on the beach with its back to the ocean, playing with sandcastles, playing beach cricket or beach football, and there are confluences of different technologies, biotechnologies of various kinds, genomics, gene editing, and so forth. Stem cell technology is still developing at an enormous pace. On top of that, robotics, brain-machine interfacing, and of course, AI, and quantum mechanics applied to computing. These things are enormous, and they are forming a vast tsunami that will change everything about the way we behave, particularly about the way we express ourselves as polities, as groups of people who have a way of living, whether it be a democracy or a populist democracy, which has been, in our opinion, our very sensible and wise opinion, doubtless has been corrupted. But that word corrupt is important because rupt, the Latin, is very important here. We must remember the way Facebook started with Zuckerberg saying we must move fast and break things. Break things in Latin is rupture, and it's disrupt. If you remember, that's the word that was used by whether it was anything. We must disrupt the hotel space, said Airbnb. We must disrupt the personal transport space, said Uber. All the ways that we grew up expecting things to happen have been disrupted, or to use Anglo-Saxon, have been broken. And we are living in that sense in a broken world compared to the world in which most of us grew up. And to talk about institutions like the United Nations, with all respect, is a bit like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. We have to address the true crisis, which is actually expressible, I think, in one 5-letter English word, which is trust. We do not trust our leaders, and that is why democracy is broken down. We can look at individual cases in the Anglosphere of so-called white working classes feeling extremely hard done by, ignored, sidelined, and so on by the general consensus of liberal progressive politics, which seem to ignore their requirements as they see it. And certainly in my country and in America, you could regard what has happened and what is going to happen in Britain clearly in the next election, not as a triumph of the right, but as a catastrophic failure of the left to understand the world that was changing around them. The assumption that everything would stay the same, that it would be okay, that we only had to operate those levers of power that might have got a bit rusty, but we could lubricate them and all would be fine. But we've come to a time in our lives where everything is new and everything is different, and we can no longer apply those same laws. We have to understand what is happening technologically, what is happening amongst the people. And that's what populism means. It's also what democracy means. It's just the Greek for populism, actually. I think, it is probably a mistake to imagine that we, in groups like this, it's no disrespect to this, it's really important to have these meetings and these conversations. But I think it is worth remembering how serious the problem is. And when you come to AI, which is a subject that I've been interested in since the 1980s, I was, I won't say a friend exactly, but an acquaintance of Marvin Minsky, who devised the phrase artificial intelligence and founded the AI lab in the 1950s at MIT as a result of Alan Turing's famous paper. And I watched through what was called the AI winter. And we now have arrived at a time with these large language models and with vast sums, hundreds of billions being poured into investment in these companies. And if most of the leaders of the world, excepting Donald Trump and probably Vladimir Putin, were to walk into this room, but also Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Sam Altman walked in the room, all eyes would be on the technocrats. Nobody is interested in politicians anymore. They are not seen as wielding power over the world.
You might be on you, Stephen.
You're being too much. That's very kind, but the power in the world is wielded by the technocrats. Yeah. Interestingly, and it's a side issue you might like to investigate, Elon Musk's father was a leading figure in the technocrat party in the 1930s, which was a serious party that actually fought very hard to win power in the 1930s in America at the height of the Depression. And if it weren't for the victory of FDR, Musk Sr. would have swept to power. He was a real contender. Instead, he went off to South Africa in a huff and gave birth, as we know, to Elon's father. But the fact is, technocrats, we have to accept that these technocrats, whatever we think of them, and it's very easy to think very badly of them, but they have far more power than the people we vote for. They would say, because that's what Rupert Murdoch said when he was, in charge of all the press. Oh, I'm more democratic than a politician because I have to get voted for every day by selling a newspaper every day. And he genuinely believed, therefore, he had a democratic voice. He was more representative of the people. And that's what we have to understand. These people believe, with their weirdly twisted libertarian Ayn Randian philosophies and all the rest of it, they believe they represent the future. And they have the power to represent the future. They can buy politicians, and have done, as we have seen, and will continue to do so. And talking about the United Nations and clubs of democracies is not going to address that problem. And of course, you will rebut me now, and I hope you can. But this is my fear about where democracy is.
Well, it's Casey's job to do rebuttals as well.
Yes, exactly. That's why I used the word.
But before we get there, I want to ask, because it's fascinating what you said. Well, first of all, I will retain the idea that democracy is just the Greek for populism. But,
well, the rule of the people.
Yes.
And populace is people in that.
But this view of technology, you've given a very dark view of technology.
No.
And in terms of, coping with the wave, the tsunami, as you put it, that is upon us. In conferences like this, technology is more often talked about the solution. I mean, another word that everybody likes in that context, to all sorts of problems. So is it both at the same time?
Let me tell you about padoom padoom. Do you know the phrase padoom? P brackets doom close brackets. It's used by scientists in the AI field. P stands for probability, expressed as a percentage, and doom is the extinction of the human race. So you ask, and I have done this because I'm lucky enough to know some of these people. There are people like Stuart Hinton, Geoffrey Hinton, Stuart Russell, Geoffrey Hinton won the Nobel Prize with Demis Hassabis. Joshua Bengio, Eliezer Yudkowsky, and you ask them, how do they set P? What percentage will they set doom at? It's like the doomsday clock that the nuclear boys follow, which at the moment is something like 80 seconds to midnight. Well, the median vote for what human extinction at the hands of AI is something between 10 and 15%, which is very high. Eliezer Yudkowsky puts it at 90%. Jan LeCun, who is the chief AI scientist at Meta, sets it at 0. But then you might consider that is like a tobacco executive setting the likelihood of cancer at 0. he has a stake in it because Meta has basically bet the farm on AI. So they believe there is a serious problem. It's known as the alignment problem. This was best expressed as some of you who may have read philosophy at the university will remember a thought experiment called the genie experiment, where you ask a genie tells you you have a wish. You can have any wish and it will grant it. It's a powerful genie. And you're a decent person. You love mankind. So you say, I want you to end all suffering on the planet. And the genie immediately extinguishes all life, which is the most perfect answer to your wish. All suffering, the genie looked to see where suffering happened, and suffering happens with living things and nowhere else. It doesn't happen with stones or sand or anything like that. It happens with living things. So if you want to end suffering, you end humanity. That's, in a very broad terms, the alignment problem. How do you possibly code dignity, justice, faith, love, honor, all the human virtues, many of which it has taken us centuries to believe in, like the fact that women and men are of equal value, or that people of different races are of equal value. It's taken us hundreds of years to believe that. How do we encode that into a machine in a reliable, trustworthy way? But so much money is being spent. So much money is being spent on these large language models at the moment, not just in the United States of America, of course, but in Russia and principally in China, which is having a lead over this. So we have nations that are controlling AI, and the idea that these can be sandboxed off is like saying, oh, there may be pollution in the English Channel, but there's none in the Atlantic. If you look at the world, there's only one ocean. There's no separation in the oceans. There's no separation in the internet or in the digital sphere or in the power that AI can have. You look at what the military can do with AI. It's terrifying. With assassinations, if someone wants to kill me now, this is now, all they need is a drone the size of my hand with a small laser in it and facial recognition, and ziz, bang, I'm dead. It can come in through the room, no one will even see it or hear it, and you're gone. That's how assassinations will take place. That's, all of these issues. And with nuclear power, even at the height of the Cold War, there were SALT talks, there were the strategic arms limitation talks, there were guardrails, there were laws, there was a nuclear club, in fact, of nations that agreed amongst themselves they would own this power and they would control it and they would try to make sure that mankind wasn't wiped out. But this time, at the time when there is no belief in international institutions, there is no belief in democracy, in law, and in regulation for capitalism. There is no belief at all in these giant corporations. They just scream communism. If you suggest that there should be... Trump has recently issued an executive order making it illegal for individual states in the United States to have regulations over AI. They're not allowed to do it because he has been bought by AI. And he knows that he and his successors will have power because of AI. So we really have to recognize this. But on the other side, sorry, Daniel, yes, absolutely. I call it AI is both chilling and thrilling, because what it will do for medicine and what it can do in ways of opening up information to all of us is absolutely marvelous. There's no question of it. But without controls, without guardrails, without agreements, without faith, without trust, as I say, it is so dangerous.